My name is Reeves Smith. We're going to talk about a new way to do integration and unit testing within integration services. I want to thank you for showing up. I know it's getting late and we're almost done, right? And so I appreciate you guys spending the time to come and check out this session. So hopefully you find something useful. And what I plan on talking about in this, if you haven't figured it out, I'm using Benwil to make this process a little bit more automated, and that's kind of the big piece around this unit testing framework is around Benwil. What I will cover is I will cover some of Benwil because I'm not sure if everyone understands what Benwil is. So we'll go through a quick demo on what Benwil is, and then we will go through integration test and then a unit testing section. So a lot to cover, so hopefully we can get through all of it. My name is Reeves Smith. I'm from Denver, Colorado, so quite a ways away. I think that way, not sure, but quite a ways away from here. I really appreciate you guys letting me come here to talk. MVP, MCM, and I'm an independent consultant, been doing BI for a little while, and that's all my contact information. But I'd like to ask the question of who in the audience that I'm talking to. So do we have people here who are just business? No non-technical? Okay. Worked with integration services. Is that the majority? Yes. Tested an integration services package. That doesn't mean in production when it's broken. That's not testing a package. So and who's worked with Benwil and Benwil Script? So we got a couple people. I've got an introduction, so for the people that kind of understand it, sorry about that, but to catch the other people up, I want to make sure we all are working off the same playing field and understand what we're talking about, okay? So we're going to go over testing levels, or we can call it, using the term testing, integration testing, and what that means. We're going to talk about some of the current approaches that you can do testing without using Benwil, and then we're going to go through. I'm going to do an introduction on Benwil, and then I'm going to do some of the testing methods that I can do within Benwil, and I'm going to show an integration services or an integration testing. Don't use integration twice in both things, right? We're going to do an integration testing and then a unit testing section. Okay. So testing levels, we have the term unit testing, integration testing. Can be kind of confusing within integration services because we call unit testing a specific item in the control flow until we talk about what? The data flow, right? Because usually there's other pieces within the data flow. So if we tested one data flow, I would call that more of an integration test because I'm testing all the pieces within that. So today we're going to talk about unit testing, and we could use that term loosely on depending on which thing you're testing within the data flow or within the control flow. And if you're testing a data flow item, I probably would call that more of an integration test, and then you could test the pieces within. System testing would be the whole thing, and of course, seeing as we're ETL developers, we don't do user acceptance testing, right? Well, not really. Okay, when we talk about unit testing, and again, like I'm saying, we could easily unit test, let's say a SQL task within a control flow. We can test that and we could see if that completed, and then after that completed, we could say, okay, now that that's done, we can go back and do some testing and test that specific item. Because when I look at a unit test, I look at it as a very small piece of code that I'm going to test, and it's not really using any other dependencies. I'm just testing that piece, and it doesn't matter how it affects the rest of the package, right? That's what I would call unit testing. And an example of that would be, let's say we test our car to see if it runs, car battery's dead, it doesn't work. Now, that doesn't necessarily guarantee me that the car is going to start, right? Because that's just a piece of the system, so I'm not testing all the pieces. That's what I consider a unit test. Now, an integration test tests a feature. So let's say if we're testing our car, we're testing that our car can take us somewhere and start. So we want to know if the car will start or not. That is what I would kind of consider a complete test for that feature, which would be the car. Okay. And I also want to throw out a language of, I want to throw out a piece here with the language with asserts. Asserts are going to be what we say is a condition that we're going to test, and we're going to use that assert as a small condition, right? We're not going to say it's A, B, and C. It's going to be, we're going to do one assert that is A equals B, another assert that could be C equals D. So assert is just the language of what we are kind of going to test. We're going to use that just as a, I just want to be able to, you to understand, so when you see a lot of times I have assert in other places, and I want you to be able to understand what I mean by that. So the current approaches that are out there are SSIS unit, and has anyone used SSIS unit? No? One, maybe? It has a method that you can set up testing, and it has an interface, and it's out on Codeplex, where you can go in and put down or fill in the little interface, have it do certain things, and test pieces. With an SSIS unit, you can only test items that are on the control flow. You're unable to test things within the data flow, and it's another piece, a tool that you have to use. And it's a method. I've used it a couple times, but it is a little bit more involved and not maybe, as you can see, not as integrated in with our system as much, or integrated in within the enterprise as much using that. There's also data tools, but I'd say data tools is more of a tool for testing SQL and not as much for integration services. But then, of course, everybody does this, right? Because when we test our packages, and that's when they break and we have to go fix them in production. But that's what we're trying to get away from, right? We want to do some testing within our environment so that we don't have to worry about them breaking in production. Because of the people that build integration services packages, is there anybody that's testing them automated, in an automated fashion? Or are we using, I've had spreadsheets where I go through and check each package for these items, and most of it's manual. I mean, because everybody raised their hand that said, we do integration services test, or we do integration services, how do we do that testing within integration services? Is it basically manual? Does everyone do it pretty much manual? Is that very much fun? No. So hopefully this method kind of shows you a way, and there's some pieces to it where it does take a little bit of work to set it up, but once you get these things set up, then it could be something that you could add in pretty easily within your environment, okay? And how would we make that easier? We're going to do that with Benwil. And the majority of the room said they didn't know Benwil, so I'm going to go through what it is. And because Benwil is an XML language, I like to go through and talk about just what XML is, so we're all on the same page. And basically, all care about is elements, which are these guys, attributes, which are these guys, and these two lines of code are the same. They have a thing called a missing element tag, and that is basically right there. So that's a quick course in XML. So hopefully you all get that, and then we can move on to what Benwil is. So Benwil stands for Business Intelligence Markup Language, and it does explain the assets within integration services and analysis services in a more simplistic manner because it doesn't use layout and it doesn't use formatting. If anyone's been smart enough to break open a DTSX package, you'll understand that that is also XML, right? But is that very easy to read? And if you move things around, it increases that XML quite a bit. And that's a nice piece about Benwil is it's pretty basic. You can kind of see what's going on. And that, I think, makes it a little bit easier to read. Well, where are we able to work with Benwil? There's two real places. You can use it within BIDS Helper, and that is an add-on that installs in Visual Studio. How many people have used BIDS Helper? Quite a few know about that tool. Even if you don't care about Benwil at all, it's a great tool. It has a lot of extra functionality around reports, around integration services, and around analysis services, so I highly recommend it. The other place that you can use Benwil is within Mist. It is a proprietary tool sold by Verigence, and it has some capabilities beyond what you can do in BIDS Helper. One of the major things is you can't do analysis services projects within BIDS Helper. You can only do that within Mist. But we're not going to talk about Mist. And I throw on LinkPad here because how many people has anybody used BIDS Helper within Visual Studio? And we know once we start adding Benwil Script how it kind of gets a little freaked out. That's why I throw LinkPad in here. LinkPad's really nice that you can actually get some of that, IntelliSense that you can't get within Visual Studio, because within Visual Studio, it is running off an XML editor, and the second you put in Benwil Script pieces, it freaks out the editor, and it doesn't like that, so then you get all the squiggly lines underneath of it. So if you want to test some stuff, LinkPad's a good place to test things. So within Visual Studio, you have the bids helper add-in running. You can use a script or multiple scripts, and you can compile those by right-clicking on them and saying generate SSIS packages. You send that to the Benwil engine, and you can create database objects and SSIS packages. Really, it's a misnomer to say database objects. Is how we usually do that is we create SSIS packages that create those database objects for us. But you're able to dynamically generate those packages, and it runs in 2005, 2008, 10, and 12. I don't have 13 on there because it kind of does. There's some problems with it right now with 13, but those are soon to be, or they're going to be fixed here pretty soon. But right now, those are the environments that it really runs in. So what does it look like? Here's an example of a Benwil file that is Benwil only, no Benwil script. And as you can see here, if you didn't understand Benwil and you looked at that, you could probably figure out what's going on pretty quickly, right? It's not that complicated. There's not that many things out there. We can see that we have a package, and in that package we have an execute SQL task, and that execute SQL task is going to truncate a table. That's the nice part about Benwil. I've also created this package and then looked at the DTSX, and it's a lot more complicated because there's a lot of the formatting things and you just can't see that. That's what makes Benwil nice, is I can follow through this pretty easy, and it makes adding Benwil script to it, which is what I can add to automate Benwil, a little nicer, and you can kind of see what's going on. This, I kind of equate Benwil to HTML, and back in the days when we built HTML that were static pages, this is what Benwil would look like. And then we got things like Cold Fusion or ASP, classic ASP, and we were able to inject strings within the HTML that made it more dynamic because it ran and then rendered that page back to us that was made dynamically. And that's where I think Benwil script comes in. Because if you look at this piece of code, the Benwil script are the items that are between the yellow, and there's three different types of Benwil script in here. This is just a code line, you could say. This returns a value. This equal signs means it will only return a value. And this is a directive, which says I want to use the namespace from system.io. And as you can see in here, if you looked at this package for a bit, even if you didn't have any C# or any Benwil experience prior to walking in this room, you could probably figure out what that's doing pretty easily. That I'm creating basically a master package that loops through all the packages that I have within that directory and creates a master package that will do an execute package task on each one of those. Not very exciting, but as you can see, that's very easy, and I'll show that in a demo. Okay, and I think that's where we're at. Okay? I would ask questions, but you guys aren't as crazy as we are in the States. Are there any questions? No? Okay, so I'm within Visual Studio. Of course, to create Benwil files, you have to have bids helper installed, and then the other thing, you have to be on all of the folders except for miscellaneous. So it puts the Benwil files within the miscellaneous folder. Do I need to zoom in for that, or is that okay? That's still okay? Okay. So it creates them within this folder, but of course, if I right-click on this folder, it doesn't do anything. I have to right-click on another folder where I can do add Benwil file. But because I'm trying to get through this pretty quick, I'm going to show you this Benwil file that we're doing here. Let me see if maybe I hide that. Makes it a little easier. And as we can see what we're doing here, I have a variable. I have a couple tasks. One's an execute SQL task where I truncate the table. I do a data flow. I have a source, a row count, and a destination, right? And I can easily turn around and execute this Benwil file, and that will generate a package for me. So if I get back to there, I can right-click on this, and here's the menu that I get when I've installed bids helper. when I've installed Bids Helper and I'm using it with Benwil Script. I can either generate an SSIS package or I can check Benwil for errors. When you go to build, my recommendation whenever I'm doing Benwil, I would always do Benwil first and then add Benwil Script to it after. And I would usually, I copy the Benwil, make sure it works and it generates the packages I need, then add Benwil Script. The errors piece is kind of nice. It tells you a little bit of what's going on, but it's still a little hard to kind of figure out. So I always suggest do a little bit, right-click, check, do a little bit, right-click, check. I wouldn't suggest making a ton of changes and then trying to generate. So if I generate this SSIS package, just note there's no packages in here, right? I can generate this SSIS package and it will build me a package automatically. And as you can see, it kind of falls in line with what I was showing in the Benwil, right? I have a truncate table, I have a data flow that extracts from a source, does a row count, and then inserts into my destination, right? And for most people, they might not think that's that exciting. And this is right where everyone starts scratching their head and goes, why would I want to write XML to create integration services package when I have this great IDE, right? Everyone's going, that doesn't sound that exciting. Well, when we first started using integration services, it was great, right? Because I had a visual tool and I could learn it pretty easy. There was always a place for me to click and I could figure out where those items need to go. But then once you started and you learned how to use our integration services, you kind of said, why am I doing this way? Because we've always had those projects where connecting to that first table is kind of interesting. The second table's not so interesting. The third table, and by the fifth or sixth table, it sucks, right? Am I allowed to say that? No, it's not as fun. We'll say that. So this is where now being able to automate creating packages with Benwil, I think makes your life a lot easier. So once I create this pattern and extracting from our source system and creating a stage environment is one place that Benwil really shines, because you can easily do it by creating that template. And what do I really need to change per package? I really just need to change the table name. I like to say there's two ways to do this. You could go the really easy way, which all I'm doing here, if you look there, is I've created a table variable. Because when I explain Benwil, a lot of people go, okay, hold on a second. I got to learn Benwil, I got to learn C#, and I have to already know integration services. That's kind of a given. Well, there's kind of what I call an intermediate step, which is if you know how to do variables, and it's probably better if I don't select that. If you know how to do variables, and one note here is to let the IDE not get so freaked out. I've commented those things out. Those are actually not commented out. The top items are, but the bottom items, because it's Benwil Script, are not commented out. It looks that way, and I do that more to keep the editor from not freaking out. But those are actually not commented out code, which makes it makes it a little bit more understandable if I take those comments off. So I've created two variables, right? I've created schema name and table name. And I make the joke that I could create these next 4 packages faster than if you try to create it by hand, right? Because I could execute this first package, and it creates my package, and then I could come over here and I could change that, and because this window goes away, I could execute it again and generate another package. So I like to say this is one way to learn Benwil in between, right? Because we can all follow with creating a variable and doing a find and replace. And as you can see, I'm replacing those values within, I'm putting the table name and the schema name on each one of those tables, and each one of those will run. So once you create that template, you could interject a variable in there and it makes it very easy. But for the people that are going, that doesn't sound very exciting, you can also iterate through, and as you get better, you can create, and I've created a 2-file solution here. I have my environment variables, or I have my connections sitting in one file, and then I have another one that uses that and iterates over through this import results. I'm going in and I'm saying, create me a source connection, and I'm restricting it on the human resources only because I don't want to create all these packages. But I get the object of all the human resources information, and I iterate through that and create all my packages programmatically. And this is where you start to see it's a little more interesting than just the one where I was replacing the variable. So I can right-click here and do generate SSIS package, and as you can see, now I have all the human resources packages. And this is where it can get fairly powerful, is I can point to the schema, grab all that, or I can point to a database, grab all that information and schema information from that database, use that to then generate over and build my objects. And my opinion is even if you have little tweaks that are different among packages, I could still go in, and this is a great starting place, right? Because the nice part about this is I know these are all the same. I don't have to worry about, if you've ever created integration services package, right after that third table, you kind of get smart enough to go, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to cut and paste this next one, and I'm going to go in and update all the values, right? This, I think, is powerful because you can go through and you can create packages pretty quickly. And that's kind of the crash course to BIML, right? Because we've got to understand that because we're using BIML to create our integration services unit testing stuff. Any questions? One last one, I could do that master package. Open. And this is that same from the example. I could come in and I could execute this one, and it will create a master package for all the packages that I have within there. And as you can see, they're all executing at the same time, right? If you were like, well, I don't want them to execute at the same time, I want to execute them, one after the other, it's a pretty easy change. If I come into the code here, oh, wrong one, sorry. Because you're not supposed to type in a demo. I'll use this, and this is the only thing that is BIML specific, and you'll say, I've never seen constraint mode integration services. Constraint mode is telling me how I will hook everything up, and that is a BIML only thing, and I'm saying, I want to hook these up linearly, so however it shows up within the XML, I'm going to hook the one below it to the one above it. And by doing that, I can right-click and generate. And of course, because I already have it there, it is going to tell me it's already there. Do you want to override it? I say yes. And now when I open it up, they're all hooked in line. They're all hooked up in line based on just how they came through when I did that, when it went through and read the files. If you wanted to put them in line, I've put stuff where I've annotated tables so that they have row counts, and I've annotated them so that I could order them by that annotation and sort them that way. And one other note on an annotation in BIML is not the same as an annotation in integration services. An annotation in BIML is tagging items so that I can then reference that tag. Annotations in integration services are like when I right-click and add an annotation so I can add text. That is something that's not supported in BIML because that's a formatting-ish kind of thing, and it doesn't support those. So, okay. Now we're going to go back to slide deck real quick. So that was an introduction. Hopefully that was fairly easy to follow. Now we're going to talk about the ways that we're going to run some tests in integration services. There's 3 different ways that we can do this. We're going to talk about the first 2. We're going to do those 2. The proprietary tool I'm not going to show, but we're going to talk about doing hand-built packages. So if you've already got some of your packages built, how would I add this methodology into my hand-built packages and be able to test those? There's a little work that you're going to have to do to those hand-built packages, and that's actually just add an execute package task to onProcess. Then I'm going to show, hopefully we get enough time, that I can show the BIML generated packages. If you've designed your packages in BIML, you have a couple more options that you can inject some tests within those. I always like to kind of show a picture of where we're going to go so we can get a good understanding. So if I want to test this package, the only thing I've got to do is add an execute package task to it. The second thing I'm going to need to do is create some metadata. In this example, we're going to use Excel because it's just a little easier for me to show and demo. But you can also do Excel files, and working on getting it so that it can read through. I have this metadata utility that makes it a little easier to read Excel. we're going to make that so that you can also read SQL. You could directly read SQL. I've done it that way, but I'm trying to integrate it in so that using this metadata utility, it makes our life a little easier. Once you have that, you're going to use Benwil to generate the master test package, and that master test package is what that execute package task is going to call to run our unit tests. And then all you have to do is execute the original. And what that looks like as a picture, we have our package that we want to test. We're going to right-click on our hand-built package Benwil file, and it's going to generate a master test package, and then that master test package is going to call our unit test within here. That master test package is going to be built based on the metadata that we have in Excel. So that's going to drive what gets built here, so that if you update that information in Excel, you can run Benwil again, and it will create a new one. I think back to the demo. Okay. So right now I've got my load dimensions. Let me go over here. And all I'm doing here is I'm doing two different methods within here to just kind of show. I don't know if I'd necessarily recommend doing this. This is just as an example, but I have our normal one where I have a sequence container around what I would really consider one package, but just for the demo purposes, let's consider the sequence container as a package, but we're running them within one package. And that first one is our normal one. We truncate and we load. The second one, I'm using a merge statement, and I've got a good merge statement and a bad merge statement where that second merge statement inserts dupes, and we can run our logic to see that we get in our first unit test, we're going to test our integration test. We're going to test that we get our row counts right, and our second one, we're going to test that we don't have duplicate business keys within our merge statement, so that we wrote our merge statement correctly. Let me open an Excel file that shows that information. So what I've written down in this Excel file is I have a package that we're calling load dimension, and I'm testing the data flow load customer table. I want to make sure that the counts are correct between my stage table and my dimension table. My message here is row counts do not match. Of course, I can put this for anything that I want. I can change this, and just so that you see that I change it. SQLRally, right? And then I'm using the connection that I'm going to use, the source connection, which is on a different tab, which is that connection back to my Benwil testing database. I've got everything within there. I've got the information that I'm tracking with errors into that database, as well as my tables. So it wouldn't necessarily be the way you'd want to do it, but everything's within one database. So if I were to have this package that I want to test, the thing that I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to come in my event handler, and I'm going to have to add an execute package task. That execute package task will have to point to my master test package. That's all you have to do. And there's ways that we could turn that off if you wanted, if you wanted to not have this run in production. You could easily throw a sequence container in front of it, put a variable on it, and then pass environment variables on when you run it, on whether you turn that on or off. Or you could just delete all those pieces out. That's the only piece that you have to do for your hand-built stuff. So what did we say? We said we wanted to test that our row counts are the same and that our merge statement runs and doesn't insert dupe values. And as you can see, I've highlighted, or I've disabled the bad merge statement, and I have the good one, so it should work. And if you saw in the Excel file, for the row counts, I'm targeting the data flow, and in the load account one, I'm targeting the sequence container. So you can target almost anything you want. So if I were to run this, am I going to get any errors in my package? I shouldn't, right? Because I built my package, everything looks like it compiles fine, and everything runs. But as you can see, all my asserts ran fine, right? And if I go back to my package, everything in my package ran fine. So life is good, right? But what if I were to run it again for the second time? Would my package fail? Probably not, right? The logic's all correct there, or at least we think so. But now we run, and we see that my package, whoops, make sure I'm on the right one. We see that my package ran fine, right? Okay, but my unit tests said that's not the case. So these are the kind of errors, these are business logic errors that we usually don't catch because everything is hooked up and worked correctly because I was able to check it, but maybe I had some logic wrong. Well, to cut to the chase, is what I've done here is, what do we see as the issue? I'm not actually truncating the customer table, am I? I'm truncating the company table, because this never happens. Because I created this package from cutting and pasting it from the company, and then I update this, and I'm always wondering why my company table's empty and my customer table's duplicated. As you can see, that unit test caught the fact that I messed up and didn't have this set up correctly, right? So now, if I were to update this to the custom, and of course I've got to look, I'm pretty sure it's just customer, yes. And again, don't type. I come over here, I update my code, I go okay. Now I run it. What are the chances of this working right? Now my unit test passed, right? Because I have my logic correctly, or I have my logic now correct, even though the package programmatically was correct, but the logic was wrong. And these are the nice things that you can start testing, and you can test fairly easy from within your environment. You don't have to go outside your environment. I can add, I can remove unit tests, and all I have to do is generate that package, and then I can run my unit test. And that seems like a little bit better way to do. Now, I said unit test, right? Unit integration is hard within integration services. I would call that second one the the duplicate check for my business key, making sure my duplicate business key wasn't wrong, and I didn't run that. I'd say that's probably a unit test, whereas that data flow one I'd probably call an integration test because there was a lot of things going on within there and not just one piece. So if I were to come in here to my control flow now, oops, pick the right one, stop, and now disable that one, and enable this one, and I ran it again, this would run correctly. But this time, I get an error on that test. And this test is basically just running a count on the correct. It's running a group by on the business key and then counting and see if anything's over. And if it is over, it does a raise error so that I can trap these. I've put in an event handler that's being fired on error. So anytime there's an error, I'm writing that back to a table. I think I have that. And as you can see, those error messages are coming back to my table so you can see that we're running. I'm pretty sure that's right, yes. Except I don't know if I regenerated my package, and that might be why I didn't pick up the row counts mismatch. All right, the row count does not match SQLRally. I don't think I generated my package, did I? And this is what that package looks like. There's a little bit more entailed going on, a little bit more details going on here. And as you can see, it's all black, right? Because the editor kind of gets a little freaked out and doesn't understand because it's an XML editor. There's nothing too exciting going on here. I'm iterating through, checking all the connections from within that sheet, making sure I add the connection. I'm also checking, no, that's not too bad. The first one I check to see if there's an audit table connection, and if there's an audit table connection, I'll add that connection in there. Then I go through and I add that logging piece, and then I iterate through and I create a package based on, I create that second package, the system package that has all the logic. And it's basically a package that has, oops, wrong one right here, master package. It has one item that then turns around, and each time this package gets called, right, I put that execute process execute package task within the post execute. So every time a task executes, it will call to here, and I've put expressions on there that will only run it based off certain tasks. I've said I want to check this task. So if I look in my expression for this constraint, I can see that this constraint will only run, I guess I can't do that. I can see that it will only run if the sequence from the load account is called. So that's how I've created a unit test for each one of the items, right? It calls to this package. It calls to this package. The root delegator then says who called me, and depending on which task called me, it will go down and run the unit test based on those tasks. So that's how you can set up integration service with unit testing that I think is a little bit easier than the current method that's out there. Or SSIS unit's nice, but there's a little bit more work I think you have to do. If you look at this first and go, hold on a second, that looks like a little bit much from a standpoint of Benwil and how would I understand or get to that. You don't necessarily have to change too much. There are some pieces that you'd have to change, which is in this CF file, which stands for control flow. If you see all these packages that are these Benwil files that I have off here that have an I in them, I'm just using them as include files. It basically says I'm going to create a Benwil file, and wherever I put this include directive, that code is going to be injected right there. And as you can see here, I'm doing an execute SQL task, and I'm doing select count, and I'm checking my counts between the two tables. So if you looked at this code and you wanted to write some other test, it wouldn't be that difficult to probably figure it out. You've got to put a couple pieces in here from within the Excel file. As you can see, the right and left were columns within that Excel file. So you could easily cut and paste one of these and keep adding your own conditions if you wanted to test them. Okay. So that's what I would call integration testing, unit testing. The one thing that SSIS unit is not able to do is test things in the data flow, right? How do we test things in the data flow? That is a very difficult piece. A lot of times we can cut those pieces out. We can try to test a couple pieces around it, but it's very, very difficult and cumbersome. This next method I'm going to show, we're going to create stubs, and those stubs are, and we're going to auto-generate these stubs for us that will test the individual package. And that's not something that I think is currently supported in anybody's product. Now there's a little bit more entailed to this one. So this one's a little bit harder from a standpoint. We had to create special items per each task. But now we're going to show, to do this though, you have to have your packages generated from Benwil. So you can't do this with packages that were generated, that were hand built. And I'm a guy who, whenever you say you can't, like, yeah, really. What you could theoretically do is use a proprietary tool out there to import in all your packages, then you'd have your Benwil for them. Then you could do this technique again. So you could kind of still do it with hand-generated packages, but within BIDS helper, you're unable to do it. I'm going to show an example of, I have a Benwil file built. I'm going to run this stubbed interface. It's going to go grab data from my Excel file, and it's going to add some stubs for me. So this is kind of the, this is the method that we're kind of going to use. So when I say stub, does everyone follow when I say stub? We're going to create a stub, which is we're going to create some code that's going to give us a data set that we want or expect, and use that data set for testing. In the example that I'm going to do here is I have the term mountain bike, and I'm going to do a derived column, and I want to change that to, I think I put fast mountain bike as a name. And of course, this is something that you might go, why would I do that? I'm trying to show you that I'm going to go through a derived column, and then I'm going to check it to make sure it did what I expected it to do. Now, this can easily be expanded because so many times we see derived columns and those calculations are extremely far, and we wonder what happens if we pass this value and that value. You could pass values that you think might cause problems, and you could test to see if those problems came through. This is a very easy example. My idea here is trying to just make sure that we can follow it. So what we have is we have an OLB data source. It's going to pull data down, go through our derived columns. We're going to change that. We want all of our columns to say fast, or we want all of our products now to say fast, and we're going to write that back to the destination. What we're able to do with Benwil is I'm able to right-click with that file, with that Benwil file, and create a package that basically stubs out and tests just that derived column. So we're going to basically pull that derived column out, make our own source, and then run our asserts after that. Okay. I would say any questions? No? So now let me close that one. So I've got my Benwil built package. And it's, if you look at that, it's basically what we said, truncate a table. It's that same pattern that I've been showing, truncate a table. But this time I'm going to use a derived column that's going to turn all my product names into fast product names, right? We're going to make that name be one thing. We want to check and make sure this derived column did what we thought it should do. Very simple. You might look at this and go, why would I check that? But is what I'm trying to show here is I can pull that derived column piece out, stub it, and test it very easily, which is next to impossible. Or at least, excuse me, I shouldn't say impossible. I don't know how I would do that in an automated fashion without cut and paste and adding these pieces. So I think it makes it a lot easier. One of the things that you could also, I think, a good thing to think about when I talk about stubbing things is you could have that data set that you run this against that has 100,000 records and you get tired of waiting for it, but you want 3 conditions to be checked, right? I want this item that causes me a problem, this item that causes me a problem in this one, and I could create a stubbed data set and run that through and not have to go through all my items to do checking. So if I were to generate this package, we can see it, normal package, right? Kind of the same pattern we were doing, except I added this change product name derived column. So now is what I'm able to do is I'm able to, let me shut down all these. Oh, whoops, nobody told me my package was still running. Okay, now I'm going to shut down. I'm going to shut down these windows because sometimes integration services freaks out when you basically change all the packages underneath of them, and I'm regenerating these packages, so then all of a sudden they go there and they go, what's going on? So a lot of times, just to be safe, a couple times integration services will say, have a good day and start over. But a lot of that is not a Benwil problem. I see it when I've generated 100 packages, and Benwil then goes through and says, hold on, let me check all the metadata for you while you're sitting there for half an hour. So that's why I like to shut everything down. It's not necessarily a Benwil problem. It's just integration services isn't used to, sitting there and then 5 seconds later, 100 packages showing up. So as you can see, I created this Benwil package, and now I have this stubbed assert, which a little bit more entailed what's going on here. I'm going to go through, I'm looking for that item within, and I didn't show you that. So I created this stubbed asserts where I said, I want to check that derived column. I want to make sure that I'm creating a new product name and I'm setting it to fast mountain bike, and I want to make sure those things match up so that I check my derived column. So I'm having to set some stuff up to be able to make that assert. And before I do that, I need to go switch my connection over to the new stubbed asserts file. And if you've worked with include files, I'm used to working with them and then trying it. You have to save it for the include file. It will not pick up what's included until it's saved. So now I select both of them. I generate SSIS package, and I get an error. That's not what we were expecting. Select asterisk from TST stubbed product. Okay, of course I have the wrong name in my file. course, I named it unit. Don't do that for a demo. What did I say? There we go. See, you can see it's actually reading the there. Now save. Generate SSIS package. What's it yelling at me for? Select the asterisk from unit stubbed product names. Is that, do I not have the right table name? Unit stubbed product. Go there. Oh, I had something else there, and I couldn't, of course, see that. Because of all the pressure of you guys looking at me all at the same time, it's killing me. Generate SSIS package, everyone's fingers are crossed. Okay, what's it yelling at me for? It's saying there's already a package there called Benwil built package. I'm okay with that. So now is what I've created, is I've got my package, and it has the call to this package that now I'm able to, as you can see, I've created my own stub, and then I pulled that derived column across. I'm adding an extra column to be able to test to make sure that it came through and came through correctly. So now if I run my package, I can see, am I assuming that to be right? Yeah, everything looks good. Because it comes back and it added my derived column, added new to it. But just to show you that it wasn't a trick, let's say I said that the other side has to equal slow, right? Which my derived column puts it at fast. So now we're going to get a problem, right? So if I save that, stop this, just to make my life nice and make sure it doesn't get mad at me. I'm going to shut all those. I've got to regenerate, right, because I've changed my metadata. Now I've got to regenerate that package. Generate SSIS package. It's going to tell me now I want to replace both of them. Do you want me to replace both of them? I say yes. I looked at my stubbed tests. I come in here. I guess I don't have to come in there, but I can run it from the control flow. It's more interesting from here. I run it. And now everything's working. It yells at me. And this gets a little more difficult within the data flow to have messages pop up. I can't just call out like I can from a control flow. So from that script, I'm calling out. And now what does it say right there? Oops. Right there. Product name is not correct. And that's what I got from that spreadsheet. So this can definitely be expanded on. This is a very trivial example, and I'm probably not winning any ooh-ah points for the simplicity of this, but it's the idea behind it that I was able to stub out a data set with something that I was testing. I could easily, if I wanted to, again, don't type in a demo, I could easily create another manual data set from within here, right? I can put that in there. So I can create my own data sets. And where I see this is, and I'll generate the package while I'm talking. Save. Come back over here. Solution Explorer. Stub to search, generate SSIS package. It's going to yell at me that there's two that I'm replacing. Now I'm coming in here, and just to show you that I wasn't kidding, we can see that that's now not going to the view. That's actually going to my new connection that I had in that file. I think that's pretty powerful on a standpoint of I know what would cause a problem. I know the 3 cases I want to test. I could create that, make a package that would test those conditions each time I change the logic and make my life a little easier. We're doing okay on time? I think that went faster than I thought. Okay. And I think that was the majority of it. If you wanted to create the unit testing where I was able to turn that on and off, it'd be pretty easy to go into your package. To go into my, for my hand belts, and actually go into the package, what is it, load dimensions, and I could come into the event handler, and I could add a sequence container. I could hook that up to my execute SQL task. I could come in here, and let me create the variable first. I'm showing how you could turn off your unit testing if you didn't want it. So I'll make a parameter, call it test, make it a Boolean, say right now it's false. Come back to my event handler, and I say on expression, and I go back and I drop that in. Right now it's false. So I'm saying don't run that. So now if I were to run this package, it shouldn't kick off my unit test. You should just see it's sequence containers firing, but my unit tests are not running. And why I'm showing that is if you wanted to go out and put these all on your packages, you could put this little piece in there. You'd have to add the variable. You'd have to add the execute package task, and you'd have to add the sequence container, but you could easily turn it on and off. Because with that parameter, I could set that within environment variables within SSIS, so I could have those not fire when I push it out to production. Or you could remove those, however you want to do it. But that's a way to use this framework and still have it work with pushing that stuff to production. So hopefully you start to see the power of Benwil and how that made life a little easier to create those unit tests. And you're within the same environment, it creates those packages, and it's not a ton of things that you had to do. Because one of the things, I had that pre-set up because I didn't want to put it in there, but you don't have to, I'll show you all you need to do. All you have to do is drop on this execute package task, and all I have to do is hook it to that one package. I didn't have to put any variables. I didn't have to do anything like that. I want to do my master test package. That's all I had to do. So I didn't have to go in and set package, bindings, put all that kind of stuff in there, and this will now work and run both of those. So it's pretty easy to go in for those packages, and as you can see, they're all running, and that one should fail because we were on the merge statement that didn't work. So you can see that you can add this stuff fairly easy. There's still some work that has to be done, and then managing it from within Excel. I'm starting to move all this stuff over to SQL because it's just easier for me to work with tables, but it doesn't show as nice where I have to write stuff within SQL, so that's why we do it from with Excel. But it's just reading metadata, and where that metadata exists can be anywhere, right? It can be tables, Excel files. The utility, this metadata utility, reads from Excel and reads from XML files. I'm not a huge fan of XML files, so I liked Excel a lot better. But hopefully this showed some ways that you can integrate this information within your environment and do a little bit more thorough testing than we've been doing previously. So, any questions? There's a whole debate on that one. My personal opinion is there's two sides of the house to this argument. There's the side that says, I'm generating all my packages, so why would I put my packages into source control? And then there's the other side that says, well, I generated all those packages, but those packages might change. I'm still of the opinion that you put the packages also within source control. And the reason I say that, okay, let's think about it this way. When I ran that first one, I looked at the metadata that was in the AdventureWorks table, or the AdventureWorks database, and I brought that all back and created those packages based off that. Okay, how could I, if a month later, create those same packages? How could I guarantee that I can create the exact same that I currently have if we said that's in production? The only answer to that is you backed up the database and you restore the database from the time I ran that execution. Well, so that's why it's really cool to be able to create those. It's really cool to be able to, in the demo, point to a database, suck everything back. I mean, I can create all the packages for AdventureWorks like that at 74 packages. It's really cool to be able to point. I didn't have to do anything. It's kind of magical, right? And you're like, ooh. That's why the big joke with the Benwil shirts is it's Monday morning and I'm done and I haven't told my boss. But I think reality comes into play, and I've started storing stuff into tables. I started creating tables where I store my information, because that metadata can change. And if I'm not backing up that database, I can't guarantee that I'm going to point and one of my developers deleted a column. It might be what I wanted to do right now, right? And that might be fine, but I can't guarantee to get back to where I was, right? And that's a thing I think is important to be able to put everything in. The other thing I say, because once you start working on the proprietary tool, you can do things differently, but I still believe that you should store the packages. Because if, like this Benwil generated package that I come in here, and I have this package, so theoretically I'd never need to check that in, right? I got all the metadata, I don't need to necessarily check this package in, but what happens when I add something to this package, right? Then it's not what I generated, so it's different than what I've generated. So I kind of have the belief, my belief is that you check everything in. Right. And so to restate that, so you look at it from a process standpoint, and you want to do it from a process standpoint. And right now I believe that's the correct way to do it. I mean, you don't have to, because I could theoretically generate, and if my schema doesn't change, then it would generate the same packages, but I think that's a little risky to kind of assume that's going to be the case. So if you did it correctly, I would say that you have to back up the database. So. Any other questions? We almost made it, right? You got one more? Okay. Thank you very much.